not sure if I have to be proud of it or if I feel guilty about it, you know. Because when I look at old people, you know, asking, how is Helen doing, you know, they're not sure about that. Can I just say, first, Robert, thank you very much for your very nice welcome. Can I also say how much I'm happy and pleased to be with you. Just as a personal comment, it's my third time now in 3 years, and some of you were looking at me, I mean, how come do you come from Geneva every year? Is it cricket? Is it Robert? Is it Michael or something else? And yes, of course, cricket plays a role, I must confess, a bit. Robert too, by the way. But the reality is, I must say, it's also your energy. It's how you are together, how you're able to think about who you are, but also what do you want to achieve. And I think that's just remarkable. And the way you're just now dealing and celebrating your 100th anniversary is a very good example. You have achieved a lot of things, and you should be proud of it, but you do not spend too much time about achievement. You're using this moment to look at what will happen to you, and how do you project in the next 100 years. And I think I found that's extremely interesting, challenging, and you have to know. And this is one of the reasons you will find both Assi and myself here. It's not just out of love, but it's also because, in fact, your future, the future of the Australian Red Cross is also our future. The way you will describe, the way you will think about the next years, the way you will design your future will have an impact on us. And be aware, I will watch very carefully how you will look at the 2020 strategy. How are you describing your strategy? I know you're struggling with it. That's a good news. It's normal. When we are looking at the world, it's a very complex environment. But the way you will do it has an influence on us. This is a critical one. So I'm here to try to give you one contribution in your thinking about the next 100 years. Take it as one contribution. This is based on my perspective, ICRC perspective, and what I would like to do is, A, to look at few features, drivers, which will influence us, whatever, being it in Australia or around the world. And then I will look at what does that mean for us and for you, right? If we try to project ourselves in the next 10, 20, 30, or 100 years. So the first features, and this time to change, I will have 4. So 4 features. The first features is really clearly, and we've heard that yesterday about some of the speakers, and this morning again, is clearly the fact that people we try to assist, people we try to protect, our beneficiaries, the people we are dealing with every day, they are confronted with multiple issues at the same time. They are under multiple pressure. And yesterday I was absolutely amazed by what O'Neill was speaking about, complex issues. There is not one single issue. And we see more and more in any of our intervention, any of our humanitarian services, it's always dealing with chronic issues at the same time as very emergency questions, right? We have to deal with acute needs and much more chronic ones. We have to manage protracted crises, being it in conflict, being in migration, climate change, and it's combined. And the pressure on the people are combined. If you look at the economic crisis right now, and we all know the economic crisis is not gone, we see how much pressure it put everywhere, and how much today and tomorrow you will see humanitarian needs growing, and you will see also the response going down. So the gap between our ability, collective ability to respond to the needs is in fact going down. A lot of countries around the world have cut their social services. A lot of NGOs, organizations are really struggling with their ability to help. So the message here is we will be confronted more and more with needs and complex needs, not one single issue. And it will require from us a different type of response. So multitude pressure on the people. And it will not fade away, it will continue. The second driver or trend is really related to what we can call the political landscape. I don't think there is a better term to that. Both internationally, but also nationally. We just heard that, right? And what it is, it means that we are right now in a situation where there is absolutely no convergence between countries at the international level. And we feel it. We feel it that today there is a lack of convergence to deal with major issues at the global level. We talked about immigration, climate change, conflict. And these are all issues who require global response. Absolutely. Cannot be managed at the level of a country or a level of a community. And we are going in a world, and we feel it very strongly, which is in transition. Nobody knows exactly how the power game between countries will settle. And look carefully. Not only it's a transition time, but look carefully what's happening right now in Middle East, in some part of Africa, in Asia. It will bring things that we cannot even imagine. I'm of the opinion that we will see country disappearing. We will see possibly new border. We will see new partnership, new alliance that we couldn't even not imagine today. So the world that we have known, the way we have seen the Security Council, for example, working, this will change dramatically. And the global platform, the global tool, will have to change very quickly if they want to be able to grasp this dynamic. So let's make sure, if we project ourselves in the next 10 to 20 years, I don't know about 50 years, but at least next 10, 20 years, what you will see is clearly a very, very strong change and a lack of international convergence. But you will also see, and we feel it very deeply, a very strong polarization. The world is polarized worldwide, but also in each country. I was struck by what was just said by my precedent speakers about what is happening right now in Australia, but I'm traveling the world. I feel that in every country, there is not that much room for compromise anymore, for consensus. Political parties are looking at each other, communities are very tense, so the polarization of the world will continue to be very, very strong. And last but not least, if you look at change in the political dimension, we have to be prepared, not now, but again in 15, 20, 30 years, also to deal with different, I would say, political structure. My guess is in 20 years, the political structures which will come out of this transition period as a winner will not be state, will not be global platform, not the UN. In 20 years, what we will see is possibly the arrival of the cities as such, big town, as really the reference for political dimension. Think about that. Maybe in 20 years, the big town of the world will be meeting together, will have their own council, will influence, in fact, the world. Possibly in 20 years, you will have not anymore only United Nations, you will have the United City of the world. I'm saying that why? Because in few years, it's already the case now, but in few more years, you will have more than 6 billion people living in urban area. Because if you look at our survey, what you will see around the world, people feel much more close to the political elite when it is the elite of a town, much more than a national elite. That there is something about the town. If you look at structure around the world, you can see that town cities, from Middle Age to today, is the only structures which has survived. Tomorrow, it will be the structures of the future. Think about that. Think what it means for the Red Cross in 20, 30 years. So we have to be ready when you look at this political landscape changing very fast, that things might be totally different of what we expect from today. And being in agreement that at least for the next 10 years, the transition will be very complex, very chaotic, very problematic for all of us. The third features, and it's interesting because I saw that in most of your discussion in the workshop already today about the digital world. Of course, the third features is about the fact that we are living in a truly connected world, global world, but, and I really would like to insist, at the same time, incredibly fragmented. And that's interesting. Connected and fragmented. And that's what we have to deal with, right? The fragmentation comes from, I think, a lot of different dynamics, the political dynamic, the social dynamic, the new, it's true, the new tools, which allows every individual to be empowered very quickly, to choose its own community. Its own community is not anymore just based physically, it's somewhere different, and we have to capture the notion of community is very different today, and it will be even more different tomorrow than it is right now. So a very fragmented world. And you see that also already today in the field. We see that in politics, but we see that in the field. Almost every armed group around the world that we are talking about are not as structured that we all think. The chain of command are very different. If you look today at the Taliban in Afghanistan, it's not one boss with a chain of command everybody obey at all. Very fragmented. Even ISIS, that everybody talk about the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. It's a very complex machine, very fragmented, very complicated. So for us to capture that, being aware that there is connections, real time, and at the same time fragmentation, would be absolutely central to be able to understand what it means. And of course, it will just increase unpredictability, volatility, and it has an impact on organizations like us when we are to deal with this very connected and fragmented world. My last feature, and maybe the most important one, at least for me, which I think will impact us all, is the fact that trust is becoming a very rare commodity. Trust is disappearing. It's not due to us, it's not something new, but it's increasing and speeding up. If you look at every survey, if you discuss with people, if you listen, wherever you are, you can see that trust in institutions is going down, very clearly, right? You can see that, and you know that very well, that even trust in the Red Cross is high. We possibly are among the latest institutions who still receive trust and is supported by people, but we also know that these days we are measured by experience, right? So the trust that people have about us could be immediately challenged if their personal experience is a negative one. And this is what will count for the people. Not what they've heard from their parents and what they're hearing in the media, their personal experience. So their personal experience can easily challenge trust. We also feel that when people have doubt about somebody, about the elite, about an institution, today their first choice will not be to trust by default. By default, their choice would be not to trust. People want to show evidence. They are used to that. They can go, they will look, they will use again internet, Google, they will check, they will compare, they will rate. So trust will be an extremely rare commodity and will be even more rare if you think about the world in which we will go, right? And let's remember, Robert talked about Henri Dunant, let's remember that one thing Henri Dunant and the founder understood, and this is what it is all about, is how do you build trust in a most complex environment? How do you build trust in a war, in violence, where exactly nobody trusts each other? That's what we have been able to do. 150 years of that, of work. 150 years. But if that is so challenged, it will have an enormous impact on the way we operate, on the way we connect. So a world which, I'm sorry to be a bit gloomy, a world which looks very challenging, very volatile, where trust will be challenged, a rare commodity, but also a world with, of course, a lot of opportunities. And this is maybe what we have to do. It's a world where our footprint might be different, very different. And I would like to propose you one or two responses, which, if I look forward, we need to bring into when we think about that. The first one, and no surprise for you, you will see that in my thinking, there are some convergence with what you have discussed already in the workshop, with what yesterday some of the speakers said. The first element for me, and this is true for 100 years, for the next 100 years, and I hope some historian will come and check 100 years later and says, hey, were you right or not? I don't know if I will be around, but okay, we'll see that, discuss that. One thing I'm convinced, and if there is one thing I'm convinced, this is this one. We will have to maintain, if not reinforce, our ability, our ambition to work in close proximity with people affected. And here I mean physical proximity, being there with the people, with the community. We'll have to think what proximity means, because we're in a world where maybe proximity is different than what we think today. but we will have to own the proximity. Critical. We will have to be closely related to the people and to be with them, embedded almost with people we try to help. And why are we doing that? One reason is very simple. It's because it will be possibly the only way to adapt our response to their needs. Their needs are changing. Their needs are evolving, and their coping mechanisms are changing and evolving. And if we do not capture that, if we're not able to adapt ourselves, very quickly our relevance will be far away, and then we'll be very challenged. You will see still a Red Cross. In 100 years, there is no doubt there will be a Red Cross, but maybe not relevant. So our relevance is extraordinarily dependent of our ability to be in close proximity with people. Fundamental. And it's also possible this is the only way for us to manage the fact that we have such a large spectrum of competences. And as you know, in terms of management, this is a nightmare to have that many expertise within an organization, that many programs. But this is what we have to do, because we have to be able to contextualize our response, to tailor-made our response. I can tell you, in 100 years, standards will not be welcome. Standard of quality, yes, absolutely, but not standardization. Already people are challenging that. So to have a tailor-made response, a smart response, responding to complex problems, we have to be close to people. You have to be there, which means as an organization, we have to take more risk. And that's what possibly will be your next strategy 2020, is how do you as a collective take more risk? More financial risk, more human resources, more people risk, more security risk, and it's a very complicated one. And we have to do that. We have to find the right balance, and it's a very complicated one, because that's what we have to be, close proximity. If we manage that, then it's a recipe for success, because it will allow us to adapt very strongly. And of course, being in close proximity allows us to do something else that is really what I call a unique selling position, which really distinguishes us from any other organization, which is if you're close to people, if you understand their needs, you can then engage all the people who are trying to influence the fate of the people you try to serve and protect. And in a very polarized world, in a world of transition, it's critical that we are able to engage not only government, but also armed group, private sectors, all the stakeholders, all the difficult ones, even the one that nobody wants us to engage. If I look at today, the work we're doing right now about trying to engage Islamic State, in order to be able to make access, to not forget that Islamic State is a group, of course, a terrible group, but there is still 10 million people under the responsibility, if you want, or the control of Islamic State. And these 10 million people are people who deserve our help, our protection. We have to fight for that. So this is investment in the future, because people will remember there was one organization who fought for it. And it's also why I think it's so important that we understand that. We maintain our principle, because that will really keep us strong, but also give us a license to operate, a legitimacy towards people. So proximity will be the central one. The second one is something that some of you brought, and here is something that we are still far from being able to achieve, or far, let's say. We still have a long way to go. I think it's possible, but it will be something challenging. It's to move from coordination to collaboration. It's very different. It's really be ready to have a collaborative approach. And I really liked what Dawn O'Neill said yesterday. It's about co-creating response, co-creating advocacy, co-creating solution. And if we all agree that we are moving into a very complex environment, we will have to do that. And possibly, that should lead us, and not the structure. Our structure are not that interesting. They're not that good, as you know. It's so crazy to have 2 international Red Cross, for example, right? It's not very good. It's not very smart in terms of a lot of terms, right? In terms of, no, really, I mean, you can discuss that. But it's not very smart also if you look at how national societies sometimes are organized between branches and the centers. And if I look at the waste of energy and whatever, but maybe, in fact, you know what? Maybe that's not the problem. Maybe the issue are not the structure. The issue is how are we able to collaborate together? How are we able to design response which makes sense for people? And maybe structure will just follow. But I know in 30, 50 years, our structure will not be the same. But that's not the problem. The issue should be how are we able to collaborate together. And here, what I mean by collaborate is, again, if we agree that our departing point will be more than ever the people we try to serve and the response, we will have to develop complex response, not only physical, but also mental, for example. So I can see in the next 30 years a major development in mental health, for example. It will affect us as an organization, but we cannot develop that each of us. So we will have to develop that together. Some of us will have to be champion when it comes to the best possible mental specialist, as an example. But I can say the same about logistics. I can say about international maritime law, because we will have to strive for excellence. But we cannot strive each of us in our little structure. That won't work. So we'll have to find differently. Possibly center of excellence, where we can build, construct collective response. I think it will happen. And I think it might happen because we are smart, we have the energy, and because, again, we are close to people. It will oblige us to do so. But collaborative, for me, is a very important one. And I would say it's a tough one, but it's possible. It's also about people, about our own ability to be leaders and to find the right solutions. And there are good examples already today. One of the good examples, typically if I look at you, I mean, Australian Red Cross, I thought that your ability to push on issues like nuclear weapon was something important. We didn't like it so much at the ICRC, but the way you did it, no, really, the way you did it, the fact that you provide maybe another perspective on an issue like nuclear weapon, to give you one example, this is what I call co-creation. Because at the end of the day, the impact is there. We have been able to change the agenda when it comes to nuclear weapons. And it's a very politicized environment, very complicated. We've been able to broach the questions of human cost, human impact of a very complex issue. So when I'm talking about collaborative, this is what I mean. Being able to co-create, to push, to go, to accept, and to provide something which is smart. I think it will be possible to do that. Last but not least, and I think this is a very important one, is we have to radically change or rethink, and we are doing that. I'm just not think that the way and the speed in which we are doing is fast enough. I think we will have to radically rethink the way we are connecting and engaging I'm careful about that, our beneficiaries. I think we have still not captured, maybe you do, but I'm not sure at least globally, the fact that the people we are serving, they are looking at us not as the Red Cross, not only, let's say. They're looking at us as service provider, more and more. And they will judge us as service provider. This is the world in which we operate. And I'm hearing, when I'm discussing with my colleagues at the ICRC, really, in the most remote area, and some of you this morning spoke about Somalia. Somalia is a good example, right? Where constantly I receive feedback from people who are comparing. I had a nice anecdote, maybe you heard about that, which is just one anecdote that tells you a lot. Remember, we were in Sydney when Typhoon Haiyan hit the Philippines. But 2 days before, you have to know, 2 days before this typhoon hit Philippines, 2 days before there was another typhoon, smaller, who hit, in fact, Somalia and Puntland. Nobody knew about it, no interest, no image. We were together with the Somali Red Crescent. We went, really trying to provide some help there. It took us 4 days to arrive at the place which was really the most affected. Very painful, very risky, very complicated. When we arrived, we were received by communities, mainly of ladies, so no warlord, ladies, nice. Saw us come, and then colleagues, first message to our colleagues, they look at colleagues and said, "You are late." You are late. My God, crossing Somalia, for the one who knows Somalia, 4 days, you are late. And they had mobile phone, they just look and says, we've seen, it took you 1 day to go in Philippines, 4 days to come to us. What are you doing? And then they look at what my colleagues were providing. Small hospital, few things. And I said, but your hospital is small. We've seen what you're providing in Philippines, much better. Mm-hmm. We have to capture that when you work locally, when you provide services, people are demanding, they're looking, they're comparing. And we have to capture that the people are not only their presence, more and more their communities, their people. We saw that yesterday with our speaker. I mean, our colleagues coming from Iraq. This gentleman, the energy he gave us yesterday, be aware that this energy is also given to his own family, I'm sure. It's connected. I'm sure he has connections in Iraq. People in Iraq knows that. People are living differently. So, I mean, this kind of element is important. It will change the behavior of the people looking at us. And we will be judge, measure, compare. So better be ready for that. We have talked about accountability toward beneficiaries, all that, but it will change dramatically the dimension. So radically change the way we will think and engage with people. And I will finish with one point which is about, and maybe with when we talk about trust, when we talk about proximity, when we talk about engaging people, I think the last element, it's about you, ladies and gentlemen. You. Because I think if the next 100 years we want to be successful, we will have to invest more in you. Absolutely. The big issue, all the surveys show it again, will be how do we retain smart people? How do we retain diversity? How do we manage that in an organization? How do we retain the right expertise? I can see voluntarism is changing around the world. People are not willing to give their time always at the same way. So how are we able to attract, to maintain? How are we able to maintain the right staff? And it's not just about salary, we all know that. It's about purpose, it's about connections, it's about relevance, and that will be a critical issue. I think that most likely will be the most important issues. And the good news for you, some of you who have also leadership responsibility, is we have a fantastic purpose, and that will remain very strong. Clarity of the purpose is just fantastic. And we do have our principle. And as C mentioned that yesterday, it will still serve us, I truly believe, around the next 100 years as compass, guiding. And maybe we will have to rediscover that among the 7 principles, there is one which maybe will count even more, which is humanity.